Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome back to the Shit Nobody Tells You About Pain with me, Amy Eicher. I am a chronic pain coach, best-selling author, and hopefully sharing things to help you improve your chronic pain and live that life that you are missing and long to live. So today we are talking about how to talk about our chronic conditions. This applies to chronic pain, chronic illness, with the people that we love and are kind of in our circle, right? So I get that the way that we're going to talk to our romantic partner is probably different than the way we're going to talk to like our acquaintances. But the principles of all of these things matter. So let's just get into it, okay? We know that it's really difficult to get people that have not experienced chronic pain or chronic illness to understand what we're going through, right? Like how it feels to live in our body. And that in itself is super isolating. It can be really difficult to talk about for reasons within ourselves. We don't want to appear weak. We don't want to disappoint people. There's a lot of reasons. We don't want to be frustrated trying to explain it to somebody that doesn't get it, right? But I'm going to suggest to you today that it's really important that we try. Now, I also want to be clear, I am not blaming you if your people don't get it. That's not your fault. That's not what I'm saying. But I'd like to lay out a case for why it's important that we at least try to get people around us to understand. Okay. People research all kinds of really weird stuff. I got to admit, like a research study just came out of, I think, Stanford that said chronic pain patients get better when their doctors are compassionate. And I was like, we spent money to research. Oh, whatever. I digress. We spend money on weird things to study them, to have research that says things we already knew, right? But we know that chronic pain and chronic illness is isolating because there's a whole world out there that is hell-bent on believing that wellness and health and lacking pain or illness is like a virtue and that they've done something right. And they don't believe that at any moment their life could become our life because people don't want to believe that. But being isolated is not great for how we experience pain. And I'll get into that in a minute. But we do know that the more pain we have and the more alone we feel, the more stress we have, which then feeds the pain cycle, right? So we don't want stress to influence our pain, and we don't really want our pain to influence our stress. So when our family or the people around us understand, when we have a solid support system, that lowers our stress level. I know I am a recovering people pleaser and that I pride myself on what I can get done, what I can contribute. And when I am in a long COVID flare or when I was in a pain flare, the inconsistency of being able to follow through on things was very, very difficult for my mental health. I am now in a season of life where I am surrounded by very different people. I have changed my world, and the people that are left in my world understand my long COVID. And that makes a ginormous difference about my ability to say to my friend Cindy, I know we had plans. I'm in a flare. Can we hold off until like I can think and breathe and talk? And she always says, of course. And then she texts me to like make sure I'm okay. She never gets upset. She never says it's not real, right? We need more people like that and less people like my darling father. My dad is 89 years old and he thinks that I've had COVID for 3 years. No, he's adorable, but he just doesn't get it. So it's difficult to talk to him about. So with my dad, because I want to maintain a relationship with him, I just kind of don't talk about, I talk about other things, right? So maintaining the relationships that I have are important to me. And part of that is knowing who I can trust and who I can't, who understands and who doesn't. And as I love my father, and as much as I love him, I also know that this really just isn't something that I can talk with him about any more than I can really talk with him about crocheting. It's not something he understands, so I don't talk about it. I talk about that with other people that understand crocheting, if you get what I mean. And I say that because if I were to try to force my dad to understand, I would be constantly stressed and frustrated. We know that chronic pain takes a toll on all of our relationships and especially marriage. And so, might I suggest to you that if you are struggling for that kind of understanding in your marriage, that maybe you go seek a counselor that can give you a hand if you would like to maintain the marriage. I'm not a marriage counselor. I am divorced, and that happened a lot because I got better. I got better from my chronic pain, and that made a lot of dynamic changes in our relationship. He met me in pain, and then, 20 years later, I wasn't in pain, and life really, really changed. There's a lot of other reasons for the divorce, but the change from unwell to well changed the dynamics of our relationship in the same way that going from well to unwell can change relationship dynamics. So, something to think on. I know that you're the one in pain, and it should be your partner that's reaching out. And I'm sorry that it is probably left to you to do it if you want. All right. So we also know that as people experiencing chronic conditions, validation is vital. Being told I believe you, being told I see you is like, it's healing. It truly, 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 it is healing to those of us experiencing these things to hear, I believe you. It's key to our mental health, but it really does impact our pain symptoms. And in my blog post this week, I linked to an article that goes into an explanation of why that is. But not being believed is a place of fight or flight because we're constantly fighting to be understood. Being believed is a piece of rest. It's a place of rest, and better things happen with our body and our nervous system, and therefore our pain, when we are in a place of rest and peace. So psychological distress, not being believed, does impact our ability to cope and our pain. We also know from research that when somebody experiencing chronic pain or chronic illness is supported by their family, right? So you don't feel like you're fighting them to be understood or to have things to be able to make accommodations for the way that you are currently able to live. They are far more likely to be calm about their pain and their situation. They're less likely to catastrophize. And we know from research, if you've listened to me at all, we know catastrophizing is the number one indicator of whether or not somebody will be disabled by their pain. If that is, if we are not catastrophizing, we have a much better chance of recovery. And that's kind of silly, but it's very well correlated. And again, in my blog post, I link some articles that talk more about that if you're interested in the sciencey side of why staying calm about our pain and believing that things can get better and believing that we're not alone can help us actually heal. We know that chronic pain affects the people in our lives. They often feel very helpless. They don't really know what to do. They feel alienated from us because oftentimes we don't want to be touched or hugged, even though we desperately need it, but it hurts. We're emotionally distressed and we're isolated, and they worry about us without really knowing how to talk to us about it. That is unfortunate for all. I would encourage you to share blog posts or videos of mine that help explain what you're experiencing to your loved one, if that helps. But the more that you can have quiet conversations about what you're experiencing, the better off you are. Now, if I were you and I were watching this video, I'd think, well, okay, that's great, Amy, but I literally don't know how. I don't know how to talk about this with my friends or family. So let me give you some tips if you don't already know how. And I would love it if you would put your best tips in the comments so that we can continue to form community here and we can help each other out, right? Okay, so some simple steps to explaining your pain to loved ones. Think about what you're going to say ahead of time. We know pain brain is real. So we're gonna kind of think through what we're going to talk about, and we're going to pick the right moment. We're not going to do it in the middle of a fight. We're not going to do it in the car while dropping kids off for sporting things. We're gonna find a moment with no distractions, and we're going to talk. We're going to use clear, simple language. I know if you're following me, you probably have an honorary doctorate in your pain, right? Or in your chronic condition. We've got to use language that our friends and family can understand. So we're going to avoid all the medicalese, and we're just going to talk about how the pain affects the way that we feel, how we interact with life, how it affects our daily life, physically and emotionally, because it's easier for people to understand the emotional impact of our pain than the physical experience. We're going to talk about it like we do when we chat with our doctors about pain, and we're going to use analogies and comparisons. Imagine like a radio turned all the way up, and instead of like just walking into a room with it every once in a while, it follows you around. I used to describe my SI joint pain like somebody was sticking a screwdriver into the joint and then wiggling it, trying to pry it open. And like fire ants had taken up residence in my upper right thigh and were just gnawing away all day, every day. People could understand that. So we want to give them something that is relatable. Share experiences that you've been through. I think of one for me. My kids are grown now, but when my kids were in grade school, I had volunteered to do something with my daughter's classroom that I was so excited about. I have a bachelor's in education. I at one point in time, I was going to be an elementary education teacher. So I was going to do this thing on the regular with her classroom, and I was so excited about it. And it was like every other week. I swear to God, I was in a flare every time it came for that thing to happen, and I had to keep texting the teacher and telling her I was unable to come. That made me feel like such a crap mom, like I was crapping on the teacher, I was crapping on my kid. I felt awful. Like it was overwhelming how bad I felt that I couldn't keep that promise. That was worse than the actual pain. And I think people get that. One of the other things that you can talk about, and I will be dead honest, this is one of the hardest things in the world for me, but being open about what you need. So asking for specific help and setting specific boundaries. If those are things that you struggle with, I get it. I've got plenty of blog posts about it, but it's also something that you really do need to find a way to get better at, whether that is, reading books about it, watching YouTube videos about it, seeking counsel about it. Those are some wounds that are really, really, really digging into your pain. Because if we can't ask for help and we can't set boundaries, we can't take care of ourselves. And taking care of ourselves is that is the way out of chronic pain and back to the lives that we so desperately want. The last thing that you can do is you can encourage them to ask you questions. Little emotional. I had gone away for a scrapbooking weekend with my best friend. She knew I was in pain. She knew it hurt to drive. She knew it hurt to sit. But scrapbooking with her was one of the small joys in my life at that point in time. And we were living in 2 different states at this point. And so we met halfway between it, Washington, D.C. and Normal, Illinois. And over that weekend, she asked me about every hour, how does it feel now? How does it feel now? How does it feel now? And she wasn't trying to be annoying. She was trying to understand what it felt like to live in my skin. And I remember we were sharing a bed, and it was like midnight, and she just quietly whispered, how does it feel now? And I couldn't even look at her. And I just said, Jess, it still hurts. It still feels exactly the same. And she wept. She wept for me because she'd been asking me for nearly 24 hours, what does it feel like? And she recognized in that moment that there was no break from the pain. There was no, it never relented. It was always as intense. And I just didn't talk about it. And I went on, and we would go on later to talk about this experience. And she said, I had no idea it was that bad, Amy. I can't tell from watching you. And I was like, well, I can't writhe on the floor in pain all day. Like that's none of us have that luxury, right? Like we don't have the ability to do that. Who's got time for that? And it's not going to help anything. So we have to keep going, even though the pain is excruciating most days. If you're lucky and you've got somebody like my friend Jess that wants to understand, they can become a conduit, if you will. Like hearing Jess ask me questions helped me figure out what other people needed to hear. And I was so grateful for her willingness to try to get inside my body. And she would do other things along the way. But that particular moment, I really thought about as I was putting this blog post together. And I was so appreciative of what she had done for me that day. And I told her so. And I think I want to be careful because I know you're struggling and I know that you're in pain. But I think we're so used to people not getting it, and we're so used to having to fight to be heard, that sometimes when people do hear us, we forget to express gratitude. And so I'm just going to ask you to reflect on your own life and decide whether or not that's something that you need to practice a little bit more of to the people in your life. And are there people that are hell-bent on not understanding you? Are there people that are hell-bent on blaming you for your pain? Do you need to limit exposure and stress to some of these people? And that's a question only you can answer. But if you would like analogies on how you can explain pain, I have included 10 of them in my blog post, which I'll link below. But one of my favorites was think of my pain as a mischievous ghost that shows up uninvited and throws a complete temper tantrum every day. That would be one way that you could describe it. Or, you know how after a long workout, your muscles scream at you? Well, my muscles are overachievers, and like existing feels like a workout every day. Feels like that all the time. Yeah. So there are ways that we can explain the burning and the gnawing and the things that we talk to our doctors about in a way that our friends can understand. And if you do not have friends that understand, if you do not have family that understands, I invite you to be part of my Facebook support group, because I tell you what, there are women and men in there that absolutely understand what it's like to feel alone, what it feels like to not be believed. And we work to build each other up. We work to improve our stress, and we listen to each other. So if you need a place, I am there every day of the week, answering questions, providing insight, doing a little bit of coaching for free, because we all need a leg up. We all need help. We all need a hand. And while I would love to coach you all and have you all do one-on-ones with me, I recognize that that's not possible for either one of us. So the Facebook group is a great place where you can come get support, and get a little bit of coaching on the side. I hope that this has been a helpful guide to conversations with your loved ones about your pain. And I will see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend.